When Thomas Jefferson becomes the president in 1801, after all of the drama of the lame duck part of John Adams' presidency and the midnight appointments, Jefferson, he's a very simple man. When he was inaugurated in 1801, he arrived simply on horseback. Adams, by contrast, came with a carriage and several horses. And you see here in this picture of him, he's wearing just sort of a very warm coat, but something that a normal person would wear. He was definitely a fan of simplicity, at least often a fan of simplicity, and he espouses this with his vision for America. He believes in the yeoman farmer. Now, that is someone who owns their own land. And Jefferson really believes in a country based on these people, that they are honest, they are hardworking, and they are independent. So this is going back to his democratic ideal of states' rights and individuals' rights rather than a strong government. In order to support these yeoman farmers, we don't need to create a manufacturing society like Hamilton wants. That's the purpose of trade. We will bring in these products from other countries, and we will allow the farmers to continue doing what they do. So we will trade finished products for our raw materials. Now, very early on in Jefferson's administration, he's going to have to deal with the issues of John Adams' lame duck session. And this is going to happen with the case Marbury versus Madison. William Marbury was one of the people who had received an appointment, meaning he had been given a new job by President Adams at the last minute, one of these midnight appointments. And John Marshall, he was the Secretary of State at the time. He was delivering all of these appointments, physically dropping off the paperwork. Because this was done at the last minute, Secretary of State John Marshall was not able to deliver William Marbury's paperwork. The new Secretary of State is James Madison, and he refused to deliver the paperwork because he's from an opposite political party. He doesn't want Marbury to take his job. So Marbury then takes this to the Supreme Court. Now, the Supreme Court was created to deal with issues between the states, but now we are seeing a case of, is something constitutional? So what happens is Marbury petitions for the writ of mandamus. This means that it should be James Madison's constitutional duty as the Secretary of State to deliver the paperwork, to deliver the appointment. So this goes to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court justice is John Marshall, the one who had previously been Secretary of State. He received his new appointment as Supreme Court Justice. And the decision that John Marshall comes to is that, yes, Marbury and these other people were entitled to their commissions, but the Supreme Court could not force the Secretary of State, James Madison, to deliver them. Now, ultimately, William Marbury does not get the job. He is kind of upset. But what this does demonstrate is a new power of the Supreme Court, what we call judicial review. This means that the actions of the legislative and the executive branches can be judged or reviewed by the judicial branch. In the Constitution, it is very vague what this judicial branch does. So now we are creating more powers. We are extending or expanding, I guess the combination of the two. What is the role of the courts? Jefferson has several issues beyond just these early months of his administration. America is in debt, and this still is from the war. This is from everything that this new country has to deal with. And Jefferson, now that he is in power, he wants to undo everything that Alexander Hamilton had done. Remember, Hamilton wanted a strong federal government. He wanted to specialize in trade and manufacturing. But really, Jefferson wants to undo everything that Hamilton had done. And the person that's going to be important with this is the new Secretary of the Treasury, Albert Gallatin. So he'll be sort of the new Hamilton. The way that Gallatin and Jefferson will do this is by eliminating internal taxes. So that means property taxes, sales taxes on things like whiskey, and we saw the problems with that with the Whiskey Rebellion. All of that is eliminated. So we are making finances, we're making cash available for the people, for the citizens. Rather than paying taxes, they now have money that they can spend, that they can reinvest, hopefully, in their farms. Another thing is that Gallatin and Jefferson want to get rid of the national bank. Again, this is an issue of national control of states' rights versus national rights. Another thing that Jefferson wants to do is to reduce the Navy. Now, these are all, valid things why the country wants to save money, and it ultimately does work. They reduced the debt by $30 million, but particularly with the Navy, Jefferson is going to learn an important lesson that it is vital to continue to spend money on the military for the purpose of defense. And Jefferson learns this with the Barbary Wars. It's the only war during Jefferson's presidency, and this happens in the Mediterranean. We still have the Barbary pirates. They are seizing American ships. They are holding the American crews for ransom, essentially, and they are demanding tribute. So there's a difference between tribute and ransom. Tribute is a fee that you would pay to these rulers in order to conduct business. It's much like a bribe. Ransom, though, that could be an amount that is being demanded in return for securing someone's safety. So Congress grants the right to send out some naval vessels, and they fight the Barbary pirates for several years. Ultimately, fighting ends between the Americans and the Barbary pirates when America agrees to pay $60,000 in ransoms. They will not pay tributes. We learned this with the XYZ affair. Millions for defense, not a cent for tribute. So we are not going to fix the issue of the pirates in the Mediterranean. Now, part of Jefferson's vision for this country is these farmers, but we're running out of space. So that's why it's important to get this westward expansion and the Louisiana Purchase. So we have the original 13 colonies. We have the territory gained with the Treaty of Paris in 1783. And then we'll have the Louisiana Purchase, you can see there in sort of the yellow or the gold, nearly doubling the size of our country. And this is related to the French. Napoleon was the leader of France at the turn of the century. By 1799 is when he takes over. And technically, this territory belonged to Spain. But when Napoleon takes over Europe, he also takes over Spain, and under the table decides that he, as the French leader, controls the Louisiana Territory. One of France's most profitable colonies was Haiti, the island in the Caribbean. It is a sugar island. And there's a Haitian rebellion led by Toussaint Louverture, where the Haitian slaves rise up against the French plantation owners. And the slaves far outnumber the plantation owners. Napoleon sends the French army to Haiti, but many of them contract yellow fever and so are unable to fight. Ultimately, the Haitians win their independence. And with the Haitians now getting independence and the French no longer controlling Haiti, the French also no longer need Louisiana, and that's because of food. This whole Louisiana territory was vital to provide food for the slaves on Haiti. The French don't own the slaves on Haiti, therefore they don't need the food. And Napoleon offers to sell this territory of 827,000 square miles, and Jefferson is able to buy it for $15 million. Now, the big question, is this constitutional? Remember, Jefferson believes in strict construction of the Constitution, only the rights specifically expressed or explained can be utilized. There is nothing in the Constitution about the president buying lots and lots of land. And he is able to argue that this falls under his ability to negotiate treaties. So Jefferson, he's a bit contradictory here. Again, 827,000 square miles for $15 million. That's a lot of money. Jefferson's already in debt, but his argument is we can't afford not to get this territory. We're going to be able to expand. We're going to be able to have more places to settle. And Jefferson, he loves learning. So he, on one sense, is just curious what is in this territory, and that's partly why he sends Lewis and Clark to explore it. Lewis and Clark go on this journey. Yes, Jefferson wants to know what is out there, but he wants to know about the potential, not just for settling. These gentlemen knew that they were going on a huge trek. They took a ton of food, but they also go on this trek expecting to impress these native populations they'll come in contact with the power of the American government. They printed up documents to hand out that said, "No, ye will be at all times extended to, so long as you acknowledge the authority of the same." Essentially, they're telling these Indian tribes, you have a new father, he's in charge, don't fight, and we'll all get along. And this really is characteristic of Jefferson's interaction with native populations. And what Lewis and Clark truly are looking for, they're looking for sort of the Northwest Passage or transportation routes, as well as timber, the commercial possibilities of forest, because wood is what ran America at this time. If you wanted to heat your house, it happened with firewood. You wanted to build a log cabin, it happened with firewood. You wanted to trade with foreign countries, you used ships made out of wood. So wood was incredibly important. As much as we'd like to think that Jefferson was completely ideological and just wanted to know what was out there, he was very savvy in understanding what was needed to help grow this country. Jefferson is reelected in 1804. Even with all of his contradictions, he is wildly popular. He extends the territory, he reduces the debt, and for regular citizens, he is, giving them more cash on hand because he has reduced all these taxes. But there still is Federalist Party opposition to him. So we see this with the Essex Junto. And a junto or junto means a group that wants to separate. What we see with the Essex Junto is they are primarily New England merchants, and they are suggesting possibly breaking away from the Union. They believe that Jefferson has steered things the wrong way. And so we see that we see that factionalism. One issue that emerges out of the election of 1804, Jefferson decides not to run again with Aaron Burr. He was a hothead. He had helped win some of the New York He had helped win some of the New York counties in the 1800 election, but he was too extreme. So Jefferson decides to run with someone else. And while we have often talked about Hamilton versus Jefferson, Hamilton and Burr are really the true rivals. Hamilton had, made some sort of snarky remarks about Alexander Burr. Hamilton had made some snarky remarks about Aaron Burr. Burr blows it out of proportion, says that it is, libel and slander, and he challenges Hamilton to a duel. Hamilton is shot in the face and dies. And Burr is disgraced. So that was kind of an embarrassment for Jefferson, something he has to deal with. Now he also has to deal with, he has all this territory. What is he going to do with all this territory? Well, one thing is Jefferson doesn't want slavery to continue into this new territory. He doesn't do anything to end it in the current states, but we see that there is continued tension regarding slavery. there are issues with the Indians. Jefferson doesn't want slavery in this new territory, but he wouldn't mind if the Indians are in the new territory, because he would like to push the Indians off of the frontier, sort of along Georgia and Tennessee and Kentucky. Let's just push them westward into this vast, empty territory. So Jefferson, I mean, he's the one who talks about all men are created equal, but here we see two very clear examples of him absolutely contradicting all of those beliefs. Then we have the Embargo Act of 1807. Britain had been impressing American sailors, which means they had been taking American sailors, and they were blockading France, and this was when England is blockading France because of Napoleon. Well, that blockade is hurting our economy. We were trading with these countries. So Jefferson passes the Embargo Act, trying to force Britain and France to respect our neutrality, and the Embargo Act would stop American ships from going to foreign ports, as well as foreign ships coming to American ports. So we can see here, a British ship, it can't come to port, but we have these rowboats going back and forth. So one result is smuggling becomes huge. But again, we see New England, particularly the New England merchants, they are especially hurt by this. So people are really unhappy. And this political cartoon, you can see he's smuggling something in that says super fine. It might be sugar or molasses or rum. But he says, "Oh, this cursed, oh, grab me." But "oh, grab me" backwards is embargo. So this is really unpopular, completely backfires. We get to 1808, another election year. And Jefferson decides not to run again, not because it's against the rules. There's nothing in the Constitution at this time about how many terms a president can serve, but in following the precedent of George Washington, Jefferson does not seek re-election for a third term. So the election, though, will depend on what people thought of Jefferson. James Madison is going to run, and there's a hint up there he is going to win. Even though Jefferson is a bit hypocritical, a bit contradictory, most people really liked Jefferson. And so they are going to agree with the person who's going to run in his party. That is James Madison, once again. Remember, he was Secretary of State. He had written the Federalist Papers, but sees in the 1790s how the federal government, the national government, got too strong. So he's the one who helps create these Democratic Republicans with Jefferson. He's running against Charles Pinckney. And what we see in the election of 1808 is, again, this sectionalism, where most of the New England states vote for Pinckney and federalist control, strong government, strong national bank, but overwhelmingly James Madison is elected. What we really are seeing is the Federalist Party is more and more insignificant. During President Madison's administration, he lets the bank charter created by Hamilton during George Washington's presidency, he lets the charter expire. So this is continuing what Jefferson wanted. He does not want a national bank. The problem is he still needs money to improve debt, and allowing the bank charter to lapse will make this possible. You can sell some of the bank shares or raise more taxes. Another thing that happens during Madison's presidency is the Non-Intercourse Act. This is what ends the embargo of 1807, and all American ships are going to continue trading except with Britain and France. The whole point of the Embargo Act was to make a point to Britain and France. So at least with the Non-Intercourse Act, we are going to continue trading, just not with the two countries that matter the most. And this will lead us to Macon's Bill number 2. It was intended to continue stopping Britain and France from seizing our ships. Britain and France are at war with each other, and so what Macon's Bill does is it says we will lift all embargoes, and whichever country makes peace with us, makes a truce with us, we will trade only with them. Napoleon sees the advantage of this. So Napoleon says, of course, he will be the first one to make peace with America. and this means that America will only trade with France, so Britain is upset. Remember, Madison and Jefferson were very pro-France. So this is going to hurt Britain's economy. This is exactly what Napoleon wants. And Britain is going to be really upset. So there's going to be some tension with Great Britain. This leads us to a group called the War Hawks. These are members of Congress that really want to go to war with Britain. Again, the issues of impressment, of trade, all of that. The most well-known war hawk is Henry Clay. He was the youngest Speaker of the House, 33 years old. He was from the state of Kentucky. And it's important that he's from Kentucky because Kentucky is the frontier also. And so not only are there problems with Great Britain, there are also problems on the frontier. Particularly we see with Tecumseh. He was an Indian leader who was rallying several Indian troops, creating a unified front against the American settlers on the frontier. He's also going to work with his brother, who's called the Prophet, and they want to terrorize the American frontier. Now, the reason this plays into the War Hawks is the War Hawks are wondering, where are these Indian tribes getting the resources to continually fight on the American frontier? And the War Hawks suspect that it might be British support, because the British would love to get some territory back to regain some prestige. And so this is another reason why the War Hawks say we need to go to war to protect our interests. In 1811, we have the Battle of Tippecanoe. This is when William Henry Harrison, he fights Tecumseh and the Prophet. And this is a way to sort of protect the Americans and try and show the British that we're not going to accept you helping these Indians terrorize us. The Americans win soundly, but this kind of is the first battle in what will become a new war against the British.